Because the most terrifying truth is this: evil doesn't enter the world through broken people. It enters through ordinary people who believe they are good. And that includes you. You wake up every day convinced that under pressure, under authority, under fear, you would still choose what's right. You wouldn't betray. You wouldn't comply. You wouldn't become cruel. But you're wrong. And the reason you're wrong is buried deep inside your psychology, your biology, and the invisible systems you move through every single day. We call this the Lucifer effect, not because it's religious, but because it explains how angels don't fall screaming into hell. They slide there, quietly, incrementally, convinced they're still standing in the light, and there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Most people imagine evil as an act, a murder, a betrayal, a scream. But evil rarely announces itself like that. Evil begins as a justification, a reason, a story you tell yourself so you can live with what you're about to do. History is filled with good men who did unspeakable things and slept peacefully afterward, not because they were psychopaths, but because they were loyal, obedient, disciplined. Hannah Arendt called it the banality of evil when she watched Adolf Eichmann, one of the architects of the Holocaust, stand in court not as a monster, but as a bureaucrat, a man who followed procedures, a man who respected authority, a man who never felt personally responsible. He wasn't driven by hatred. He was driven by order, and that should terrify you. Because order feels moral. Structure feels safe. Authority feels reassuring, especially when the world feels chaotic. But Machiavelli warned centuries ago that people obey power long after it stops serving justice, not because they are evil, but because obedience feels easier than thinking. You don't wake up one day and decide to become cruel. You wake up and decide to fit in. You decide not to speak up. You decide it's not your place. You decide someone else will handle it. And every small decision dulls your conscience, just enough that the next one feels easier. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Philip Zimbardo proved this in one of the most disturbing experiments ever conducted, the Stanford Prison Experiment. Healthy, normal, educated young men were randomly assigned to be guards or prisoners. Within days, the guards became sadistic, not because they were bad people, but because the role gave them permission. Uniforms erased identity, rules replaced empathy, power rewired morality, and the prisoners, they became submissive, broken, afraid. No one forced the guards to be cruel. They discovered cruelty inside themselves once the environment allowed it. Zimbardo didn't discover that people are evil. He discovered that situations are stronger than character. You like to believe you're different, stronger, more ethical, but the human mind doesn't work that way. Under authority, your brain literally shuts down parts responsible for moral reasoning. Neuroscience confirms this. When someone in power gives an order, responsibility migrates away from the self. I was just following instructions. I didn't make the rules. The mind is relieved, guilt dissolves, and suddenly, evil feels clean. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Evil accelerates when identity replaces morality. The moment you stop asking, "Is this right?" and start asking, "Is this us?" you're already lost. Tribes don't require you to be good. They require you to be loyal. History's greatest atrocities didn't begin with violence. They began with labels: use, them, civilized, dangerous, chosen, inferior. Once someone is reduced to a category, empathy becomes optional, and cruelty becomes efficient. Stoic philosophers warned that when you see people as tools instead of humans, you lose yourself before you harm them. Marcus Aurelius wrote that every injustice damages the soul of the one committing it first. But modern systems don't care about your soul. They care about outcomes, metrics, targets, results. So morality becomes inconvenient, and when morality becomes inconvenient, it becomes negotiable. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Most people don't turn evil for pleasure. They turn evil to avoid pain. Fear is the most powerful moral eraser in existence. Fear of losing your job, fear of being excluded, fear of being punished, fear of standing alone. When fear enters, ethics exits quietly. This is why authoritarian systems don't rely on brutality alone. They rely on uncertainty, ambiguity, silence. If you don't know where the line is, you stop asking questions. If punishment is unpredictable, obedience becomes automatic. Over time, you internalize the rules. You police yourself. You stop noticing what you're doing. Nietzsche warned that when people suppress their conscience long enough, they stop hearing it altogether. At that point, cruelty no longer feels wrong. It feels necessary. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The most dangerous people in history weren't sadists. They were idealists. People who believed the end justified the means. People who believed suffering was unfortunate, but required. Once you believe your cause is righteous, anything becomes permissible, even atrocities committed for the greater good. This is how good intentions rot into evil outcomes. You don't see yourself as the villain in your own story. You see yourself as the hero making hard choices others are too weak to make. And that's when the transformation is complete. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Evil doesn't need hatred. It needs distance. Distance from consequences. Distance from victims. Distance from responsibility. The further removed you are, the easier it becomes. A drone operator thousands of miles away presses a button. A bureaucrat signs a paper. A manager enforces a policy. Each step feels small, but the outcome is massive. The system fragments responsibility, so no one feels guilty. And when everyone is responsible, no one is. You live inside systems like this every day. Workplaces, governments, platforms, institutions. They don't ask if you're moral, they ask if you're compliant. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The scariest part of the Lucifer effect is not that good people can turn evil. It's that they don't notice when it happens. There is no moment of realization, no dramatic turning point, just a gradual numbing, a slow erosion of empathy, a quiet rearrangement of values. You don't cross a line, the line moves. And one day, you look back and can't recognize who you've become. But by then, it feels too late to stop. So how do you resist this? Not with slogans, not with optimism, not by believing you're special. You resist by staying uncomfortable, by questioning authority, even when it's inconvenient, by refusing to outsource your conscience, by remembering that obedience is not virtue. You resist by paying attention to small compromises, because that's where corruption begins. And by understanding this one brutal truth, the capacity for evil is not a flaw in humanity. It is a feature of it. The moment you accept that, you become dangerous in the right way. Because awareness is the only antidote. And that brings us back to where we started. You believe evil is something other people do. It speaks in calm voices and reasonable tones. It doesn't scream, it explains. And the mind loves explanations. The human brain is not designed to seek truth. It's designed to reduce psychological pain. So, when your actions conflict with your values, the brain doesn't stop the action, it edits the values. This is called moral disengagement, and it is one of the most efficient psychological weapons ever discovered. You tell yourself it's temporary, that it's complicated, that you didn't have a choice. Each explanation becomes a brick, and slowly you build a prison where cruelty feels logical. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Evil spreads faster when it feels invisible. The most effective systems don't force you to do harm. They design environments where harm feels like a byproduct. Think about it. How many people cause suffering without ever seeing a victim? How many decisions are made in rooms far away from consequences? Distance anesthetizes empathy. When suffering becomes abstract, conscience weakens. Numbers replace faces. Statistics replace stories. And once that happens, morality becomes theoretical. This is why modern evil rarely looks dramatic. It looks administrative. Forms, algorithms, procedures, no blood on the hands, no screams in the ears. Just efficiency. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Power doesn't just corrupt behavior, it reshapes perception. When you hold power over others, your brain literally changes how it processes their humanity. Studies show increased power reduces activity in regions associated with empathy. Not because power makes you cruel, but because it makes you less aware. You stop seeing individuals. You see roles, functions, obstacles. And the moment someone becomes an obstacle, harming them feels justified. This is why tyrants don't wake up thinking, "I will be evil today." They wake up thinking, "This must be done." And necessity is the most seductive excuse of all. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Evil doesn't require conviction. It requires momentum. Once a system starts moving in a certain direction, stopping it feels harder than continuing, even when you know it's wrong. This is escalation of commitment. The more you invest in a decision, the harder it becomes to admit it was a mistake. So you double down, you justify more, you harden. At some point, reversing course would shatter your identity. So you don't. You keep going. This is how ordinary people become defenders of the indefensible. Not because they're blind, but because seeing clearly would destroy them. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Silence is not neutral. Silence is participation. Every time injustice goes unchallenged, it is reinforced. Every time cruelty is ignored, it is normalized. Evil doesn't need everyone to agree. It only needs most people to stay quiet, and silence spreads faster than resistance because it feels safer. It protects your comfort, your status, your routine, but safety has a price. And that price is always paid by someone else until it isn't. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. The line between victim and perpetrator is thinner than you think. History loves clean categories, heroes and villains, oppressors and oppressed. Reality is messier. Many perpetrators were once victims. Many victims become perpetrators when power shifts. Pain doesn't automatically create wisdom. Often, it creates resentment, and resentment seeks an outlet. When suffering goes unprocessed, it transforms into cruelty disguised as justice. This is how cycles repeat. This is how never again becomes again. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. You are not immune, not because you're weak, but because you're human. The same mind that allows compassion also allows cruelty. The same need for belonging that creates love can create violence. And pretending otherwise is how the Lucifer effect wins. So what actually protects you? Not morality as an identity, but morality as a practice. Questioning yourself regularly. Noticing when certainty feels too comfortable. Paying attention when obedience feels rewarding. It's asking, again and again, if everyone did what I'm doing right now, what kind of world would this become? Because evil thrives when people stop asking that question. And this brings us to the final truth, the one that decides everything. Evil doesn't begin with hatred. It begins with the belief that you are incapable of it. The moment you think, I would never, you stop watching yourself, and that's when the slide begins. You believe evil is something other people do.